welcome back to the People of Fishing podcast. I'm Chris Kingery. It's been a while. We took a little hiatus and, we've kind of revamped some things. We've been really busy here at 44 Tackle, and it's been a little bit of a chaotic time this whole last year. So, what we've done is our first guest back will be Vernon Kemp. For those of you that don't know Vernon Kemp, he is one of the Lake Harris legends, hammers, whatever you want to call him. Myths, I don't know. He somehow drops 30 pounds on the scales every time he hits them. So I want to introduce Vernon Kemp. Thanks for coming, Vern.
Good to be here, Chris.
So I've, over the years, I haven't been fishing very long, not bass fishing anyways. I grew up saltwater fishing in Crystal River. And the first time I ever fished the Harris chain, I saw a yellow bullet on the south end of Little Harris. And there was a guy there flipping lily pads. And at that time, I was not into flipping anything. I was casting a worm. I was learning. It was a whole new thing for me. This is about 7 years ago, I think, 8 years ago. And somebody that I was fishing with the next day during the tournament said, "Oh, that was Vern Kemp. You must have been close to where you should be this time of year because he's whacking them." And I was like, man, that's kind of cool. Just, going out on your own, just looking at stuff, no information, no nothing, rode around the lake, stopped there. Some local is there. It was during the spring. So obviously we all know what that means, bed and fish. But what got you started into fishing, when it comes into,
I think we grew up as kids fishing farm. I grew up fishing farm ponds. I actually grew up in western Kansas.
Mm-hmm.
I was born and raised in Manhattan. My father was working for UPS at the time, so he got transferred from Manhattan to Kansas City, and so I, in and around the areas there and playing baseball for the local team. I actually grew up with Brent Chapman.
Okay.
And me and Brent played ball together and kind of grew up together up until about I think I was 15 when we moved to Florida. But, fishing a lot of the farm ponds and stuff there. And then, it's a little different up there than it is down here. So when we moved to Florida in 84, I didn't even know what flipping was.
Right.
Never even heard of it.
Mm-hmm.
And so going to Leesburg High School, there used to be an old bait shop right there just outside the high school grounds. And I would go up after school and wait there for my mom to pick me up when she got off work.
Mm-hmm.
And the old gentleman's his name was Bill, and it was Bill's Bait Box.
Okay.
And great, just a great little shop like 44 Tackle is. You get a lot of locals that gather in there in the afternoons and you listen to the talk. And, being young and being into that, you kind of take in everything that's being talked about and different techniques and different baits. And at the time, the Megabucks was here.
Yep.
And if anybody lives in Central Florida and has grown up here anytime at all, you remember the Megabucks. That was
Mm-hmm.
just a huge tournament for the area. And a lot of the guys that would gather there in the evenings, they all fished the Megabucks. Some of them did well, some of them didn't. But as you progress, if you're into something, you learn a little bit about it, and then you want more.
Yeah.
And you want more knowledge and more know-how, and it just kind of grew from there. And just fishing the chain on the weekends with friends or with my dad, and then I got introduced to tournament fishing when I moved to Umatilla.
Mm-hmm.
They got a little tire store up there that has actually become quite a competitive little tournament that they hold every year, but
Yep.
they call them this tire tournament up there. But I got introduced to tournament fishing through that, and just like the competition, and just really kind of thrived on that.
Mm-hmm.
And it just kind of took off from there.
Yeah.
I think, your parents get to the point where they want to choke you because that's all you want to do. Going to Leesburg High School, my worst downfall was right in the middle of campus. You're sitting in first period math and you're looking out the window and there's schooling in the pond out front. It's like, I can't take this. But just growing up on the chain and over the years knowing where they should be, when they should be there, and I mean, obviously it's changed a ton um, over the past 30 years.
Right.
And I mean, you being into it just in the 6 or 7 or 8 years that you've been into it, you've seen it change
For sure.
dramatically.
For the whether it's the lake itself,
Yeah.
vegetation changes, the water levels are changing, the structure changes.
Yeah.
There's hurricanes and things like that that come through that change everything. Grass going in and out of the lakes, fish kills, everything comes in cycles, and it seems to sometimes they come back around, sometimes it's what had been.
Sure.
And I think that one of the things that is interesting about bass fishing is it's never the same. No matter, like, you can anecdotally put down things, conditions, but I don't know that spots per se are as good as what used to be spots with all the fishing pressure
Sure.
and
Pressure dictates a lot of that.
yeah. So, like, 8 years ago, I don't think we had the pressure that we do now.
No.
When I first got into bass fishing, I took saltwater tactics and things like that to start, got my butt whooped a bunch. But it seems like that now it's more about constant changes that you're waiting for or you're looking for. And whether it's color changes or, like, the Harris chain's a big one that, one year June bug's an on year, the next year watermelon red's an on year. And we noticed that through our sales in the store. But it's it's kind of interesting to me that the watercolor will look the same, but that color that they're targeting is a little bit, for some reason I've noticed that in our sales through the store and like fishing. But I think that the amount of pressure lately with YouTube and the, television broadcasting of events, I mean, it's a good thing because people are getting outdoors and getting out to learn something new and do things with their hands. And I think that's an important part of growing up. You're problem solving. You're trying to find a way to, locate fish. That's what actually got me into bass fishing too. Was you know going from saltwater, you're chasing patterns and you're chasing um, a lot more of a movement of a fish, like where they're going to be moving up and down the coast and things like that, and trying to target depth ranges and current ranges and things like that. But with bass fishing, it's you've got a lake and the fish can only go so many places, and you're playing the Rubik's cube, trying to keep putting it together until you finally match all the colors. And you're like, all right, I think I got it for today, but then tomorrow everything's different. So
Yeah,
that's what
tomorrow the clouds will blow in, the wind
that's
changes.
what keeps it going. It's like, oh well, they're blowing west today, blows east tomorrow, and everything's shot. Now we got to start over again.
Yeah.
It's like somebody grabbed your Rubik's cube and twisted it all up and threw it in the corner.
Yeah. And when I guess my patterns aren't so much keying on specific areas as it is times of the year.
Right.
I've always been one to try to mainly pattern the bait. It's like me and you sit down every night for dinner, 6:30 or 7 o'clock, and we have our dinner, and you take a shower or whatever, and you're in a routine. Well, those fish are the same way.
Yep.
So if you can pattern the bait and know where the bait's going to be, when the shad spawn is, where they move, and how they move, the bass aren't far behind.
Right.
And it doesn't necessarily just dictate the bass. It dictates the speckled perch and the sunshine bass and the catfish. I mean, it's a little bit of everything.
Right.
And everything, it's the food chain. So if you learn the food chain and what it does on that particular body of water, you can dial the fish in a little quicker.
Absolutely. Yeah. It. What do you think has been the pivotal point in recent times to to these bigger bags? Like, I hear people from, like, um from you hear the old timer stories and stuff like, oh, I caught you used to catch stringers of 10 fish that were would have went 50, 80 pounds, whatever it was, for large bags and stuff like that back then. What do you think changes right now to group fish up the bigger fish? on a lake that's a huge body of water like the Harris Chain?
Well, we had a major fish kill on the chain in the early 90s, and it pretty much killed everything. And when the chain came back, it didn't receive the amount of pressure that the Kissimmee chain or Okeechobee or the
Right.
St. Johns River was receiving.
Yeah.
And there was no vegetation, so the fish just kind of stayed in open water and roamed. And they spent their summers suspended over shell bars and things like that. And really, nobody targeted those fish.
Mm-hmm.
They were mainly, beating the Kissimmee grass or the lily pads or the docks. And so you had a short period of time where those fish uh, were very accessible, but once they pulled off, nobody messed with them.
Right.
So now you have a class of angler that's a little more adapted to offshore fishing, and locating those fish on the shell bars, out off the points and things like that, whether it be a state brush pile or somebody's brush pile that somebody's dropped. That and the electronics now are so much greater,
Mm-hmm.
and I think there's a lot better understanding
Right.
of what sonar actually is.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you can kind of contribute that to the kids that, I mean, I'm just as guilty. You can set a computer in front of me and I'm lost,
Mm-hmm.
but I can show you anything that I want to do with my hummingbirds or my Garmins, and I'm right at home.
Yeah.
If I have a problem with updates, something like that, I go get my 15-year-old daughter. That's just. I think that class that's coming up now is a little more technologically advanced.
Yep. Yeah, you've got guys like Patrick Walters and
Sure.
some of those guys that are using the live scope that are really tuned in. Like I was watching him on St. Lawrence and or not the St. Lawrence, it was Champlain. And when he was looking at their smallmouth, he was working a jerk bait, but when he was working the jerk bait, it was just constant. And all of a sudden you saw him just stop. And then he went like this twice and hooked one. And he was looking at his screen the whole time. He wasn't looking at the bait, wasn't looking around at the birds or anything like that. He was looking straight at the screen and knew exactly that moment. And had I, you watch that on TV, like, and somebody that's never seen it before is like, oh, come on, it can't be that good. And then you go experience it, like you with the spec fishing, and like when we went to Lake Hartwell, I got to see it in 40 foot of water with spotted bass that were sitting on a brush pile in 40 foot of water, and you can work at top water and see it splashing at the top of your screen and know exactly on that brush pile where to stop it so that they rise up for it. And then as soon as they stop rising, you work it again, and then they'll go up another 10 feet. And then you work it again. Next thing you know, they're 2 inches from it. And by the time you realize that they ate it, you're watching it on the screen as it happens. And you hear the splash, and your brain hasn't registered to set the hook yet.
Yeah. I was very fortunate. My wife has always supported my fishing. I made the agreement with her many, many, many years ago. I mean, me and Sherry have been together for 23 years. And I always told her that I would never take money from the house to
Mhm.
pursue fishing. And I never have, but I pulled some money out of my 401k when the live scope first came out,
Yep.
and I was going to paint the house. And we're getting ready to leave for Douglas. And at the time, I was traveling with Shaw and Daryl Pons,
Mhm.
and I was running way late. And she's like, "Well, you need to go up and see Jake. What do I need to go to Astor Bait and Tackle for?" She's like, "Well, he's got something for you."
Yeah.
Well, unbeknownst to me, she had bought me a live scope with the money that we were going to paint the house with. And so, of course, then you got to install it.
Yep.
So I was late leaving that night, and that's the night that I fell.
Oh no.
Um, Having that 3 years under my belt before people really started to notice what forward facing sonar was a huge help to me.
Yeah.
And like you say, being able to realize, hey, I can see my topwater bait, I can see everything.
Yep.
And I really got tuned into it there close to the house at a little old lake in the forest, catching the speckled perch, and they'd be out 18 to 20 foot of water suspended at 10 foot.
Yep.
And I'm throwing a 32nd ounce tube jig at them
Mhm.
and messing with them. All you got to do is get around them and they're going to eat it. Well, I mean, that's how I kind of oriented myself with the forward facing sonar. And Patrick Walters is he's one of those technologically advanced kids
Yep.
that he grew up messing with that stuff, and he's so adapted to it that it's like, it's like fishing without a rod if you took it away from him.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
It's just a tool of his trade.
I don't know. I wouldn't discredit him to that though. I think that kid could catch fish in a mud puddle sometimes. He's one of those like
Yeah.
those guys that you look at and you go, okay, there's some guys that are really working to be there, and then you got other guys that you feel like they could tie on a pink bubble gum worm, go to the Walmart parking lot, and go catch one.
Right. And he would have to transition back into not having that.
Yeah,
But if you've watched him over this since his tournament in
Since
Texas
yeah.
last year when he just stuck that huge sack, he has really relied a lot on that.
Mhm.
And we've heard Zona and them talk about it on live before. You get to a point where you're so tuned into that
Yep.
it ends up hurting you in the long run. Like yesterday on the St. Lawrence, he struggled.
Yeah, yeah, I saw that.
He struggled, and for somebody like him, you realize 3/4 of the way through the day, I've done burnt my day up and I've only got 2 fish in the well. Now what am I going to do? It's not working.
Yeah,
And there has to be a point in time when you say, okay, this isn't working. I need to quit this and just go fishing.
yep,
And I think that yesterday he got caught up on that and it bit him.
yeah. Well, and I think at this point in the year too, when you've had a decent year, and he knew that he had to make a big run at it to win Angler of the Year too, because he's second in line behind Seth. And if he really wanted to make a run at it, I think he had to, especially when you got people like the Johnston brothers and
Sure.
Gussie and all those guys that are hammers up in smallmouth country. I think that when it comes to that kind of stuff, I think that could play a huge part psychologically to go, okay, I need to have 22 a day to even get close to winning Angler of the Year,
Yeah, well, it was
because of the point spread he's got to go against on Seth on that,
right.
and somewhere Seth's really comfortable.
There was no doubt going into that tournament that he was swinging for the fence.
Yeah.
He was already classic qualified.
Yep.
So it was nothing to lose,
Yeah.
everything to gain if it would have,
Yeah.
if he'd have hit it a home run and hit it out of the park. But you win some, you lose some in this game.
Yep. For sure. For sure. But that's why not everybody's doing it either.
That's true.
But yeah, no, what's crazy is even though, a guy that struggled like that yesterday, like we haven't seen the weigh-in today yet, but coming into today, does somebody make up that? I've seen stuff with somebody like him that they make up that ground really quick the second day, and you like come out of nowhere with it, like to an ungodly rate. I think he had like a 27-pound bag the one day after having like 10 the first day or on one of the other tournaments. And like, how do you decide that you need to scrap that plan and go find something else that's gonna? Because I've seen guys like that. Like I know Bobby Lane does it all the time. There's a couple other big names that are real good for at 2 o'clock not having a fish and somehow dialing it back, pulling out the drop shot and pulling out 5 out of somewhere and still get their 10 pounds just to stay alive till tomorrow.
That's just having confidence in what you have as a backup plan.
Right.
When I first started fishing the opens, I was fishing them. I was preparing for them just totally wrong.
Right.
And you having opening experience and with the FLW stuff, you'll understand exactly what I'm saying is
Yep.
when you go into a multi-day tournament, I was used to fishing, 1 or 2 day derbies where when you go into a 3 or 4 day derby, it sets up totally different.
Yeah.
I mean, fish management is huge then because you can't burn what you have. If you have very little, you can't burn it all up on day one,
Yep.
just trying to stay in the hunt. And if you do, then you have to just scrap it and just go fishing.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah. And
a lot of those guys are so knowledgeable because that's what they do for a living, that they know what to look for, and they know what depth they need to be targeting at that time of year, and what the pattern should be. And you listen to some doc talk, you kind of put your own game plan together on what you hear, what you see. You don't believe everything you hear, you don't believe everything you see, but you kind of evaluate things on your own,
Right,
and,
right.
and come up with a plan.
Yeah, I think the one thing that amazes me is like watching Brian New yesterday, and it's something that I've kind of started doing now that I've been on the boater side for a couple years, and you don't understand that when you're on the co-angler side until you've actually like been in the shoes and got your teeth kicked in a bunch. But you had 200 to 225 boats on a field on any lake in the country. It's either going to fish really big or really small. And when it fishes small, it fishes really small. The Harris chain is one of them that can fish really small. When Griffin's on fire or Dora's on fire or Harris is on fire, you'll know exactly what lake it's going to be one in almost, because 90% of the field's going to flock there.
Yeah.
And it sucks because you're like, I don't want to go do what everybody else is doing. But for some reason, 20% of the field catches all the fish doing that.
Right. Right. And usually it's that one guy that finds that same scenario that's off on
Yep.
its own
Yep.
that ends up, coming out triumphant at the end.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. But in a 4-day spread too, I figured out that practicing is more key about finding areas than it is finding what the fish are in those areas. It's almost better to have the ability to reserve 20 or 30 bites over the course of a couple days than it is to say, okay, I'm going to smack them on this one area, or I've got 6 or 7 areas I think I could go catch a 5 pounder in. It's almost better to not even practice that stuff and just lock it away for the tournament time and go running on a milk run in some point, because then you're fishing the moment fresh. You don't have any history or anything that reminds you that, oh, I caught a 5 pounder here in practice, I got to go back.
Yeah.
You
Well,
know,
lakes that you have history on are the worst ones to set
absolutely,
up on, because you just have so
absolutely.
much in your mind. And, a lot of us have tried to fish history and it just doesn't work.
We're our own worst enemy on those
Sure.
too.
But you take a 200 boat field or a 250 boat field and you put it on a lake that you have history on, it's totally different from when you're fishing a 30 or 40 boat tournament,
Oh yeah.
just from pressure moving the fish,
Yep.
and that dictates a lot of the bite.
And sometimes I feel like, you go to these things and then you get all this like pressure built up on yourself and doing well, and your family, your friends, and your support system all going behind you the whole way. And then let's say you go somewhere and then you suck, or on paper you suck, is what happens. Um, the stuff that goes into that though, the 5 days of practice you just put in, everything you've learned about that lake in that time, and then the day of, did you really suck, or did the stars not align that day? Because I've had days where it's been where I don't know if I would have changed anything I did. I just didn't execute. And I think that's the difference sometimes of when you get back to town, like, oh man, what happened? And you're like, well, 225 boats changes some things. That's
Sure.
great. You won your club tournament that had 30 boats in it and you had 20 pounds, but you know, we went to the big fish factory of the world and it only took 15 pounds to win.
Well, there's 1,000 scenarios, and you
Yep.
can never prepare for them all.
Yeah.
Weather, barometer, wind. I mean, there's so many variables that add up into that. Um, and you might have caught them on the east side of the lake on a
Yep.
calm wind, and the tournament day, the wind's blowing out of the west, and everything that you practice has got 3 or 4 footers rolling up on it,
Yep.
and it's a wash.
Yep.
And then trying to take that day and say, okay, let's go to the west side and see if we can make it work over here on the west side because it's calmer. And you know, whether it be docks or grass or whatever you're fishing, it may not be nowhere near the same over there. The water depth, there's so many variables that play into it.
One of the things that I think is interesting about, and I've fished with Miles Berghoff for a couple years. Actually, Miles is going to be on for our next episode of the podcast. Um, So in the couple years I got to sit on the back of his boat for the opens, in practice, what was interesting is some of the ways, and I fished this at like Lake Norman was the one that really kind of tuned some things in for me getting ready for the boater side was fishing with him. One thing that he looked for when he went around docks and things like that during that time of year, it was like post spawn. When we went to Norman, it was post spawn. Um, there's still a couple spawners lingering around, but it was mostly post spawn. Bluegill spawn was starting to head up. So we literally went and took small little crappie jigs and pitched them around docks looking for bluegill just to find the bigger concentrations of bluegill in those creeks to know which docks were going to be productive to run back through and shake off bites. And that to me was like something I would have never thought of had or same when I fished with Brian Latimer that same tournament. The first thing we did was we went up to a line of docks and he said, "Man, I think there's a shad spawn going on these docks." He's like, "I haven't seen it. I haven't seen any flickering or anything like that, but every fish that I caught out of one of these docks in this area had a shad and it's spitting it up on my carpet." He's like, "So something's going on up here. It's not apparent to anybody, but I think." So he was throwing a swim jig trying to force a shad spawn bite, and I was catching him really pretty good behind him on a Ned rig. And then he, you know, obviously shut that down real quick, put a worm on, started scraping him up in front of me. But that's just like things that being like a local angler, you don't think about all the time until you ride with somebody else. And that's why I think like a lot of the guys that fish local level stuff and haven't fished a BFL or haven't fished any of that stuff, I think co-angling is a great opportunity and a cheap way to get a good lesson at whether it's making mistakes and finding out what your boater did wrong that day that they probably shouldn't have done, or you go with somebody that sacks them up and is leading the tournament after that day.
Yeah.
And I've been on both sides of that, and I've caught a bunch of fish on the back of the boat and I've caught nothing. So it's like you get prepared for everything that comes into play when you go to the front of the boat, and then you find out everything else.
Yeah.
All
Yeah.
the stuff they didn't tell you.
For those of us that just went straight to the front of the boat, it has its rude awakenings,
Yeah.
and you get your teeth kicked in a bunch before you finally realize, hey, I'm doing this wrong, or maybe I'm approaching this situation totally wrong, which was exactly what I was doing for the first 2 years. Is and a very good friend of mine happened to sit me down and says, "Hey, you're preparing for these tournaments totally wrong, and you're fishing them totally wrong. You're going out and swinging for the fence on day one, and it's not working."
Yep.
And that's exactly what I was doing, and I kind of changed my game a little bit and changed my mentality on the game, and it helped me in the long run. And I'm sure that you've experienced the same thing.
Yeah, for sure. Some of I haven't cashed many checks in it, but the couple times I did, the most interesting part was those were the two most stressed out tournaments I have ever had leading up, and threw everything out the window. Fished day one and caught them decent. Fished day two and caught them decent, and had enough for a check. And that was the most eye opening thing at all. Was I was putting so much pressure on myself in practice. Like Cherokee about broke me. That was the roughest tournament I have ever had in my life, because we went up there even a couple days early because we knew it was going to be tough fishing. So we actually did 7 days of practice for that one, which I hate the idea of long practices because I feel like I'm going to end up overthinking it.
Right.
I needed every 7 days of that practice because on day number 7 was the day I caught my first keeper in the whole lake,
Yeah.
fishing 12 hours a day.
Well, I wouldn't feel too bad about that because I got a very dear friend that lives there.
Yep.
And I was expecting Nick to do very well,
Mm-hmm.
and he didn't do well at all.
Yeah,
I think he caught one fish his first day and zeroed his second.
when you've got those bigger limit lakes and the TVA system and stuff like that.
Yeah.
It gets real like you may even catch 20 fish a day and they just won't measure. Yeah. It's sometimes about figuring out how to get those right size fish to bite.
Whether they're pulling water or not pulling water.
Well, I've had that.
You got to catch them either way.
Yep, exactly. And that's learning experiences that you figure out once you've been kicked in the teeth.
Sure.
And you're never going to know. Like, you could write all this stuff down on paper, and you'd have to read it the night before every tournament you ever fished to remember every rule that you need to follow without having the experience there to know. And I think that's where the misconception is sometimes, where you see some of these guys that do it really quick, and they go, oh, well, Patrick Walters, he's young, he can do it. Or so-and-so's young, he can do it. Some college kid just got in the Elite Series, he can do it.
Yeah.
I can do it too. And then, what the part they don't realize is those are extraordinary individuals that have put something together and had the life experience, and hit it on the head on the first go around.
Yep.
Not everybody's that good.
No. There's a select few.
Yeah.
And, I think what really straightened it out for me was, I want to say in 2018, the Kissimmee chain.
Yep.
And I was on some pretty decent fish down on Kissimmee, and was looking forward to the run down there, was hyped up about it. And a guy come in that night from West Virginia and plugged into my power pole at the motel and tripped the breaker.
Oh, no.
And I had no batteries. So I get up, and everybody's out there panicking. It caught his boat on fire. I'm up at 3:00 trying to figure out how I'm going to charge my batteries, because the power poles didn't have no batteries. So I run down to Tahoe Marina, and I'm plugging into one of the resident boats down there, trying to draw some juice to charge my batteries before the day. And I think about 45 minutes in the morning, I didn't have no trolling motor.
Oh, no.
And, and it wasn't even worth me weighing in my 4.5 pounds. So I just scrapped the day and thought, okay, well, tomorrow we'll just go fish for a big fish. And I think I caught 13 or 14 pounds that day, but I was behind the 8 ball already. So I just scrapped that day and come on home. And that was a big eye opener for me. I was so worried about, zeroing, what's going to happen if you zero, what do people think? And, in this sport, you can't let that bother you.
Yeah.
I don't care what Joe Blow thinks because I zeroed on, one of my home waters.
Mm-hmm.
I struggled very fiercely this year with my home water. And I threw everything in a basket, knowing I was going to be missing the second tournament. So I figured, well, we'll swing for the fence on day one and just see if we can't hit a home run. And it just didn't work.
Yeah.
And so day two, I didn't even fish.
Yeah, the Harris chain.
I came to the Harris chain, and I ran the boat for my co-angler, because there was no sense in me not showing up and giving him his shot.
And he was doing pretty good too, wasn't he?
Yeah, he did well, and he actually had the fish on that day to win it.
Oh, man.
And she come off about third jump.
Oh, no.
And I know Ron was sick.
I bet.
Because it was a good one.
Yeah.
But I think he finished 10th or 11th, somewhere in there. But Ron's a good guy, and I've known him for a long time. He moved to Texas several years ago, and I was very fortunate that he came back and we got paired together. He's fishing out of the back of the boat.
You've had a couple lucky draws to get some friends on the boat. Brett Hobson up in Champlain. I remember that one.
Every time that I've drawn something like that, something bad has happened. Whether you blew your motor up or, it's just been, but to have those people around you, it's comforting to know that you got a friend by your side.
Yeah.
And, you get with people. I don't think I've ever had a bad co-angler.
Right.
You hear some people just moan and cry and groan about co. I don't know. Maybe I'm seeing things different than other people. I get along with them all. We have a good time.
Yep.
And if you can't go out and do that, then you probably need to look at what you're doing, because something ain't right.
Yeah, that's one thing. I've had very few that have, maybe one or two, I'd say, that have pushed my buttons a little bit, but not on purpose. I wouldn't say.
Right.
It's just the way that person was, and it just didn't jive with my personality that day. Especially when you're not catching them and they're catching them. When you're doing everything you think is the right way and they're doing the same exact thing as you and catching them. And it does happen. And that's it's how they treat that situation. And for me being on the back of the boat, I remember how I treated that situation. Because on Champlain, I had the same kind of deal. We ran all the way to tie on that first day, and that was a rough ride.
I bet.
And we went all the way down there, and I caught 4 fish in the first 20 minutes, and my boater had, 1 fish in the boat, and he thought we were gonna be down there for 45 minutes and leave, and we're 2.5 hours in, and he's, like, freaking out, and he was fishing a bluff wall down there with a football jig, and I was throwing a wacky rig Senko, just being the co-angler, just trying to catch my limit, and, I was throwing 2 pounders back because I needed 2.5 or better, and I'm catching 1 3/4 to 2 pounders back to back to back on this wacky rig. And he looks at me, he's like, "That wacky rig's catching them, huh?" And I said, I mean, yeah." He said, "Man, I just don't understand it. I had 4 pounders on this bluff wall yesterday, and they were chewing." Now I lost a 4 pounder the first part we pulled up to that bluff wall because I was did a rookie mistake. But he what he didn't realize was the conditions had changed that day. And in practice the day before, it was sunny and them fish were sucked up against that wall. And it was cloudy when we were down there, and them fish were suspended all over the place. And that wacky rig slow falling, I just let it drown until it started swimming, and those fish were coming and picking it up as it was slow falling. So he had the right stuff. He was just trying to fish the bottom when they were up here.
Yeah.
And I finally I sat down and started eating a sandwich after I threw back my third fish that was the same size that I couldn't use. And he still had 1 fish in the boat, and he goes, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Dude, I'm back here wasting your fish for you. I've got 8.5, 9 pounds for 3 fish for as a co-angler. None of these are helping me right now, and you need a limit. We just took an 80-mile ride, and you need to do something with this." I threw the bag of worms at him. I said, "Put a wacky rig on and go catch your limit." And he's like, "All right." He went and caught his limit. And then we went back up, and that gave him enough confidence. He ended up calling up to like 15 pounds, I think, something like that, before we went back. But
Yeah, but see, that's what it's about.
yeah.
It was 2 minds in the boat, and it worked out.
Yep.
Both of you worked together. Both of you ended up with a decent bag.
Yeah.
And that's what it's about. And like I say, if you get to a point where you're not enjoying yourself,
Yep.
you need to check up because you're doing something wrong.
Yep. So the one thing, like we had a club tournament on the Harris chain the other day. The weirdest thing for me, and you being somebody that has a lot of experience out there. Now, when you fish usually on your bigger bags that you've had, have you found that you catch them more first thing in the morning or sporadically throughout the day, or like morning and then a little bit in the afternoon to compile that bigger bag?
I have caught them, where you have 27 or 28 pounds by 9 o'clock in the morning, and I've caught them to where you've got 10 pounds at noon, and then you get a couple, 3 or 4 really big bites.
Right.
So I've had it both ways, but most of the time, if you're on quality, you're in quality. I mean, if you're
Right. Right.
catching 4 to 6 pounders, that's what you're going to catch. Other times, if you're catching 2 or 3 pounders, that's what you're going to catch.
Right. So one thing that's interesting is I notice when I have the workings of a decent bag starting, like the first 5 turn out to be 12, 13 pounds, something like that, a nice happy medium weight, not the, grand slam, but it's good. Um, you're 1 fish away from the money kind of deal. The whole day slows down. It feels like, all right, I just looked at the clock, it's 9 o'clock in the morning, and then you feel like you've been fishing for 3 more hours and it's only 9:30. I've never understood how that works. But that's one of those things, like, when the world's on fire, it's 2 o'clock and you've got nothing. And when you're on top of the world and you feel like you're just comfortable going for a day of fishing, it's, the whole day drags on and you're like, man, is weigh-in coming yet? I mean, this is,
Yeah.
I was wondering if you had that feeling when
Yeah,
you,
I know exactly what you're talking about. We've had, me and Randy been fishing together, tournament fishing together for 23, 24 years.
right.
And we've had days where, we're sitting on a 30-pound bag at 10 o'clock, and it's like, where are we going to go now?
Right.
And go find a shade tree. And then, there's days where we can't, between the two of us, we can't put it together.
Right.
So I've experienced it both ways, but I know exactly what you're saying about early in the morning. You get it that fast, furious bite, and it's boom, 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 boom before the fish shut off, and then they shut off, and you're like looking at the clock, and it's only like 8:45, 9 o'clock, and you're like, wow, we just whacked 15 or 20 pounds in 15 minutes.
Yeah.
It doesn't take long if you get into the right bunch.
Yep.
And like I say, it's kind of like the river. If you're catching 2-pounders, you're going to probably catch 2-pounders.
Yep.
Unless you change. And if you're catching 4 to 6-pounders, that's probably what's in that area. You might not get as many bites,
right?
But that's what you're going to. That's the quality that
There's
you're.
There's a reason to stay there. Yep,
definitely.
So the you're an inspiration to a lot of people, whether you know it or not. To me,
I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing.
Honestly, it's for what you go through on a daily basis. I think that's the craziest thing to think about, that we have it so good. And I'm beat up at the end of a travel schedule, going like, we're getting ready to take this New York trip. I know that when we get back, it's going to be, I'm going to feel like somebody
I'd
ran
love
over
to go
me.
with you.
Come on.
That's just up there. It's just a hell of a fishery.
Yeah. It's this time of year too. It's absolutely the time to go.
Yeah.
But how do you get through the day with the things? And most people probably don't know what that is. You maybe explain kind of what you deal with.
Well, was it about 4 years ago? I fell off the back of my truck getting ready to go to Douglas, and I broke my sternum. And I went to Douglas and fished 9 days with it broke, and it just progressively got worse and worse and worse. And the last 2 days that I fished, both tournament days, I had to have my co-angler pull a trolling motor up for me.
Man.
And then I got in the truck and come home. Didn't catch any. I mean, we didn't cut a check. We missed a check. Come home, and I actually got stuck in the back seat. I pulled over just south of Atlanta to get some rest in the rest area, and I climbed up into the back seat, and that was probably the worst thing I could have ever done, because it took me 3 hours to get out of the back seat the next day. Wow. I couldn't sit up to open the truck door, and I had to try to open my feet. And so a maintenance guy that was cutting grass there for the DOT, he helped me get back in the driver's seat, and when I got home, they put me in the hospital for 3 days. And a bunch of scans and drinking the dye and everything. They found the crack in my sternum. And he said that would be a very hard heal. It'd take about a year for that to heal up fully. Well, in the process of that trying to heal and doing my everyday things, going to work and working for the printing company and trying to fish on the weekends and things around the house, I just started breaking bones. Wow. I was have 3 or 4 ribs that would break. I'd, have a coughing spell. I'm a smoker. Mm-hmm. I don't recommend that for anybody, but I would get into a coughing spell and I'd, break a rib. And so we couldn't figure out what was going on. Well, then we went to Chickamauga.
Yep.
And I stepped out of the boat at Chickamauga, and my hip popped. Didn't hurt, didn't bother me, no pain in it. And when we came home, my wife had an appointment for me to go see a endocrinologist. Mm-hmm. So in the process of going to see the endocrinologist, I had a primary care physician that was kind of looking after me. And she sent me down for some x-rays. And 2 days after the x-rays, she calls me. She says, you need to come down and we need to have a conversation. So I went down and we sat down, and she walks in and she shuts the door and she says, Mr. Kemp, she says, do you believe in the Lord? Yes, ma'am, I do. And she says, well, we need to pray. Wow. And I thought that was, that's kind of blunt to come at somebody with something like that, right off the bat. So anyway, she explained to me what was going on. And in my left hip, I had what they thought was a mass. And so it come to the point where I was going to the cancer facility at Advent Health in Eustis, and it come to the point where they had actually given me the tattoos to receive my chemo and radiation when I got a second opinion from the Mayo Clinic in Jacksonville. And what had happened was when I stepped out of the boat in Tennessee, the head of my femur shattered.
Wow.
And all the bone marrow that was in my left long bone was in my hip joint. And they thought that's what was cancer. So the endocrinologist and the doctors at the Mayo Clinic reevaluated things. Thank goodness, knock on wood, it had no cancer.
Yeah.
But bones just repetitively kept breaking. And we were actually scheduled to go to Champlain
Right.
when I got the news that the head of my left femur was shattered.
Wow.
So we were actually up there when I got that email, and she's like, "Whatever you do, you need to be extremely careful." Well,
That's not the place for it. That's for sure.
We're fishing Lake Champlain,
especially not that tournament.
Yeah.
That the one day of practice was like 30-mile-an-hour winds, and
Oh yeah,
there's people taking the ferry, taking their truck and boat on the ferry just so that they could make it to a ramp across the lake, so they didn't have to drive their boat there.
Yep. And it was rough, but like I said, it didn't bother me, and I didn't have any pain in it. When we came home, they put me in the hospital up there at the Mayo Clinic, and they replaced my left hip, both the socket and the ball. And then I had a bunch of vertebrae that had a bunch of compression fractures in them. And then I had 2 that collapsed. And, things just started breaking really easily. And so what they come to the conclusion of was that I had the worst case of osteoporosis that they had seen. And when I walked in the door up there, the worst case they'd seen was a negative 2.4, and I was at a negative 3.9, which is a bone density. So my bones were like paper thin and really brittle. So they started giving me some stuff to try to build bone mass, and it wasn't working. You could take a reclass infusion. I took that, and then a year later that they reevaluated that and gave me a bone scan. I actually lost bone mass. So now I take my day consists of, now as I get up in the morning, I have to eat right away, and it consists of a very high, my body doesn't produce any vitamin D, and it doesn't produce any vitamin C. So I don't have anything that builds any bone mass. So my diet consists of things that are high in vitamin C. Lots of orange juice, lots of dairy products, lots of milk. I take a 18 milligram Extampa, which curves all I have 38 fractures that I deal with every day. So it kind of curves the pain of that a little bit. And then at noontime, I eat again. I take another tablet. And then in the evening time, I take another Extampa to get me through the night. And then I take an injection that's called Forteo. And it is to, the way it was explained to me and my wife was it's like you have two carpenters in your body that build bone. One builds bone really fast. The other one comes back and cleans it up. So your bones are constantly changing. So you got your carpenter bone builders, and then you got your ones that come in and kind of sand it down and clean it up. And what it's trying to do is force my body to create the bone, but not clean it up so that I have some bone mass.
I hear you.
And so far, it's not working either.
Oh man!
So they pretty much. I had my right hip replaced March 28th of this year, and she pretty much told me that we sat down with the endocrinologist and the bone doctors, and she said that I pretty much had 3 to 4 years, 5 if I was extremely lucky, and one or two things is going to happen. I'm either going to snap my spine and I'll be paralyzed from the shoulders down, or it will put me in my grave.
My God.
So, I look at, I don't look at it as a downfall. I mean, does it hurt? Sure it does, because I was just getting started in the game. I got 2 grandkids, a 15-year-old daughter that I'd like to see continue on. And, in 4 or 5 years, there's a chance that won't be around for me to be a part of anymore. But you look at the brighter side. There's people out there that are fighting cancer that are on their last leg now, and
Yeah.
they don't have that choice. And I just try to live each day positively.
Yep.
And
Well, I can tell you do a pretty darn good job of it because some
it's
of the
tough.
events
I
I
mean,
see you roll up to, it's
I sit down and I talk with y'all, and I get talking about, and it tears me up some. I'm not gonna lie, and I battle depression.
yeah,
I really do. And to know that you had something and it was right there, and you were ready to take the next step, and then poof, it's gone. So it is what it is. It's the hand that the good Lord dealt me, and I'm willing to accept that.
well, you've definitely made lemonade out of lemons. I can tell you that because the amount of positivity you bring every time you're on the water. And, every time we see you at the ramp, just like I saw you today, you walk in, the first thing you say to me is, we say, how's everything going? And you say, oh, fight the good fight. I'm here. You know, that's, that means more to the positivity of life than,
Well, there's two ways you can look at it. You can just throw your hands up and say, "I quit," which, I've never been a quitter.
yep,
Or you can pick up what pieces you have left and try to play the game. So I
absolutely.
try to play the game.
Yep.
They won't let me work, which is just absolutely killing me because I've always just been a very active person, and for them to tell me now, you have to sit in that chair all day long, and you can't do this and you can't do that, and I always had a big garden and a deer hunted and a duck hunted, and we fished, and I can't do none of that now.
Right.
But I have a very supportive wife. Uh, love her to death, and the good Lord blessed me with her. And we have two, beautiful daughters. I got one that's 28 that has two grandbabies, two little girls. And then I got one that's 15 that, we're putting her first truck together.
Yeah. I've been watching that on Facebook.
And, it's been trying, but
Yeah,
you got to enjoy it while you got it.
absolutely. Absolutely. So I think, what lies in store for you now? Like what's your plans going forward?
Well, talking with the wife, and she knows my passion for the sport. And
I remember there was one that you didn't want to go to because you just were not up to it. She kicked your ass out the house and said you need to go.
but coming up, I'm gonna try to make the trip in September to Norman.
Mhm.
And then not working has really put a damper on things. And so I'm gonna see in the next before registration of the Opens next year. I'll see if I can put something together that maybe I could do a year or two of the Opens. I think I could. They're gonna actually go in. I'm going to talk to a doctor in August about burning the nerves in my chest. I have a lot of pain in my chest from all the breaks in my ribs and in my sternum. It's created a big area of scar tissue. And so anything I do with my arms, 3 or 4 or 5 hours into it, it starts to become very painful.
Right.
So they're going to go in and try to burn the nerves around that scar tissue area to take that pain away to where I can actively compete again. And we're going to try to do 2 years on the Opens if things work out. If not, then
Well, hopefully one on the Opens, one on the Elite Series, right?
yeah, that would be great. That would be a dream come true. But
At least a classic.
yeah, and that was always my dream. I wasn't one that just wanted to make a lifelong career out of it. I just want to know that I could compete with the best of the best on that day.
Yep.
And I come home with that blue trophy, and that was, to me, that was my goal.
Mhm.
Anything beyond that was above and beyond.
Yep.
That was just the cherry on top. And every dog has his day. You never know. You might go to New York and you might kick their teeth in.
I mean,
You
that's
just
the
never
plan
know.
every time.
Sure.
Every tournament.
And that's the competitive nature of a tournament fisherman.
The way I look at it is, if you're not the way I've always looked at a tournament, like you hear it all the time with guys at local fruit jar tournaments and stuff like that. With, let's say a guy with a rat boat walks up. Like we used to have that all the time. Glenn Brown used to fish our local Wednesday nighters with us every week.
Sure.
And, you'd have people that weren't from around here that didn't know him. They'd see the rat boat, go, oh, great, we're going to just
I miss
donate our
Glenn.
money. And I'm like, where else are you going to pay $30 to fish against one of the best fishermen in the world and figure out if you got a shot against that guy?
See, they're looking at it as, oh, he's going to take our money.
Yeah.
Where me and you look at it as, he's going to teach us something.
Exactly. Well, and
and that's the difference.
Yeah, and a guy like Glenn too was not the guy that was there to
No,
make any hard feelings.
Glenn was the kind of guy that he would bust you with 30 pounds, and then he would either take you out and show you how he did it.
Exactly.
And if you didn't have time to do that, he would explain it to you. Glenn was an icon of the sport. And living in Florida, we've been very fortunate to have a bunch of those come out of this.
A lot of guys that are
and there's a bunch of them around. You got Trevor Fitzgerald, you got
Shaw Grigsby,
Bernie Schultz, Shaw Grigsby. Shaw's one of the best sight fishermen in the world. You got Jeff Fitz. I mean, the state of Florida is just you could go
Robbie
on and
Crosno
on.
And
sure, Mikey Kiso, Roland Martin, Scott Martin. The Smiths.
Yep.
I mean, the list goes on. And, where people make their mistake is they roll up and say, oh, man, we got to fish against them today. No, you need to take that as a learning experience.
Yep.
They're going to show you something or teach you something today. That's what, that's the way I paid my money was, okay, we paid our $40 entry fee in the Sunday tournament. We're going to learn something from Glenn today, or we're going to learn something from Shaw today. And that's where a complainer is different than a competitor.
Yeah. Well, and my question to them as soon as you hear that is, why are you even here? Did you want to fish? And are you competitive?
Right.
Because what's the difference of that guy?
Yeah, you should never want to fish down.
No. The whole reason to go to a tournament is thinking that you've got a shot at winning, whether you're the worst guy or the best guy. You're going either for a lesson or you're going to win. And I think that's the big misconception when those guys like Jacob Wheeler pulled up to the Lake Weir Wednesday nighter or Tuesday nighter when they were here, and they went out there and they won, and donated the money back to the Classic Fund. They didn't even take the money, so that just goes to show it's just competitive nature. It has nothing to do with somebody wanting to go beat up on a bunch of people. Sure, it made a great YouTube video for them and all that stuff. But at the same time, what's better than going and hanging out with the consumers, the people that don't get to go, fish against you on a regular basis? That's a great way to give back.
To me, the camaraderie at the ramp with that group of people is what I look forward to. I look forward to the dock talk beforehand.
The good talk and the bad
ribbon.
Talk.
Yeah, the ribbon, the hard time. And you develop that, you got little cliques of people. And usually this click over here is giving this click over here a hard time, and that's what makes it fun.
Yep.
And it's much more enjoyable if you can enjoy it and have fun at it, rather than complain about it or dread it. Like I say, if you're dreading it, or you have a problem with somebody else, or somebody else is catching 30 pounds and you're not, and you have a problem, then you really need to check up what you're doing, because you're not doing the right thing,
or you need to work harder at it.
Yeah.
That's the way that I've always looked at
it.
If I'm not doing it right, I'm not.
This is not a sport that's going to be handed to you.
Yep, for sure. Sure.
You've got to work for it.
Absolutely. So the thing how do you think that we should look at fishing pressure in tournaments when it comes to other anglers? So the biggest question I get is, from kids growing up that are fishing the Wednesday nighters and stuff like that. They come in and they'll ask, what do you do when somebody, you go catch them one week and somebody's on your stuff the next week? How do you handle that situation? Is usually for the new guys getting into it, they get discouraged real quick when they go have one good week and everybody's all over their stuff. And and from somebody experienced, I know you've had that happen in the past
Sure.
at least once, right?
Sure.
What do you think is the right way to handle something like that?
There's 2 ways to approach it.
Yeah.
2 proper ways. The first thing you could
For
do,
the youth of America, by the
right?
way.
The first thing you can do is you can come off plane. You can ease up there where they're within talking distance, and you can ask them, "Hey, I was fishing here last week. I'd like to fish here this week. Do you mind if we fish here with you?" If he says, "Yeah, I really do," then you go on. And if you don't have a secondary spot, then you go find one.
Right.
The second way is just to go on to something else, and maybe 15 or 20 minutes from now, he's done there, and you can come back.
Yep.
And he may not have caught him, but you may.
Well, and that's just it. Like you may give up what you were doing there by pulling up on them and throwing whatever, whether you're throwing a 6XD or whether you're throwing, a worm or whatever it was. Maybe he's approaching it completely incorrectly. Or you could, and sometimes, like if it's an offshore thing, you could see that they have no clue what they're doing when they pull up to it. They're either 100 yards off of it, but in your way, or they're on the fish because they're, and if you just stay away from the I mean, confrontation of it,
Yeah,
it's almost better because then you just stay off in the distance till they leave, and you can maybe come back and come scrape up what you need.
right. It's always better to be the bigger, better person. Put your tongue in cheek. Wish him good luck and go on about your business.
The hardest lesson for people to learn right now is that reputation in this industry, it's a very big industry, but a very small industry.
And
And
you don't want the wrong name.
not at all. Reputation is 100% what builds if you ever want it to be a career, that's, whether it's even to be a sales rep in the industry,
Sure.
or if you just want to tournament fish and have some sort of name behind you or get sponsors and things like that. It's all about networking, and it's all about who you know, and it's all about having the right personality, because whether people realize it or not, from a sponsor perspective, everybody knows everybody, and you can call 3 or 4 people and find everything you want to know about somebody. Sponsorships are not like job interviews.
No,
There's no regulations on sponsorships on whether you get them or not.
that's correct.
It's there's no proper process to finding out background information to make that decision. And I think that's something that some of the guys coming up right now that are trying to collect their badges and, say I go here or I go there. Now, and not to discourage that, I think that's a great way to get in with people because it puts you on their radar. I'm not saying that people should do things for nothing, but I think a great way to get involved with a company that you're passionate about is go on Instagram and post those nice product shots, and, constantly tag people that you appreciate, and send every now and then send an email and say, "Man, I really like your stuff. I just really want you to know that I'm, invested. Is it okay if I put your logo on my jersey? I want nothing for it." That's not, to me, a patch pirate. That's not somebody collecting badges. That's somebody that's passionate about working with that company and trying to put their roots in for 5 years from now.
Right.
That's probably more appreciated by vendors and manufacturers than the guy that goes out and whacks 30 pounds one day at a club tournament and says, "Oh, I'm local, stick, whatever.
Yeah,
I'm
I
getting ready
don't.
to fish the BFLs next year. I'm gonna," that whole talk.
I don't care how well you can catch them or how well you can't catch them.
Mhm.
No company wants to be tied to a negative feed.
For sure.
I mean, it's just it's not only bad for the company, it's bad. It's a bad vibe for the people around it,
Mhm.
and you've got to have that PMA, that mental attitude, the positive mental
Yep.
attitude that Gerald Swindle talks about so much is huge.
Yep.
And there I can't think of any company in this world that would rely on a negative impact.
Right.
Just wouldn't happen.
Yeah, it's we get the request forms all the time and things like that at the shop. Especially since we brought Matt on this year, so we got a little bit more exposure on that. Everybody thinks we've got a ton of money to just hand out, like lottery tickets. But it's interesting because we get the replies back after the fact of, why we chose certain people for it. Why didn't you choose me? You chose this guy. I fish way better than him. But it's the personality of that person that they can bring so much more to the table off of what we're looking for our brand, for our Instagram or our social channels, our YouTube stuff, our video products. Or it could be something as simple as somebody that I know that fishes 5 days a week, and that sticker on the boat and a business card that we hand them just from them having conversations at the ramp with somebody from out of town that comes to town because we have quite a lot of tourists in our area. It's Florida, a lot of people moving to town, all that stuff. And the first thing they want to do, they don't want to go talk to a guy at a store that they think is going to sell them something right off the bat. They're going to go ride by the local boat ramp, see a guy loading his boat, and say, "Man, how'd you do today? What are you catching out there?" You know, People from out of town don't know what they're fishing for even. And the guy that's willing to stop and talk to that person for 5 minutes and stop exactly what they're doing, loading their boat, and give them undivided attention. And then at the end of that sale, not even a sale, just a conversation, that person wants to know where they can find that tackle or wants to find that item or what are you using? There's a huge promotional aspect that you can gain a customer for your sponsors in a 10-minute conversation that's more appreciated than you throwing stuff all over social media talking about, oh, this is the best thing I've ever honed, that whole spiel. I think, for a couple years there was a lot of that going on. Now we're starting to dial it back a little bit because, once everybody's doing it, it's, common. I think everybody looks past it. It's like, for me, billboards. Who looks at billboards anymore going down the road? Very few.
Not many.
There's a bunch, but how many could you really say catch your eye these days? That's why boat wraps, truck wraps, things like that are very popular right now because it's in your face and it's got a speaking point. You go to a gas station, you see somebody with information on their vehicle, you can ask them about it. And I think that personal connections come back around, even though we have all this technology. I think we've got to a point now where you're able to bring back in some of that, and that might be something COVID's actually, or coronavirus has actually brought everybody back together and grounded them a little bit because it forced everybody to shop local again because Amazon was weeks on end on shipping stuff out and prioritizing and things like that. And so a lot of the local stores started seeing a lot more business and you had a lot more.
It brought the human interaction back.
Exactly.
Yeah. I agree with that.
And, restaurants getting takeout, people are having home meals. A lot of people are cooking more because they couldn't go out to restaurants as much. Fast food joints were busy and couldn't keep up. And
to me, it brought the family back together.
Absolutely.
We went through a time when I was growing up, and I'm sure when you were growing up, we ate dinner as a family every night. And we try to do that with our daughters, every night.
Mm-hmm.
And, my youngest, she'll come home from volleyball practice. How was school today? How was volleyball today? You got any homework? And that was a big key between me, my mom, my dad, my two sisters when I was growing up. And me and Sherry use that a lot with our youngest, just to see what's going on, and I think it brings a family closer together.
Mm-hmm.
It builds a little more family bond. And I think there for a while we were getting away from that.
Yeah.
I think the country was getting away.
Well, and everybody was getting too busy.
Yeah, mom and dad both working 40-hour week or 50-hour week jobs, trying to make ends meet and keep up with the Joneses. Yep. And the kids were at home doing whatever they wanted, whenever they wanted. And I think it kind of put a stop to that for a little while, and hopefully, that family bond will stay together.
And for the outdoor industry, it's been great because we've seen more people fishing than we've ever seen. We haven't been around that long in it, and we've only been open 5 years now. But from year one to now, what I've seen people picking up rods that have never touched a rod in their life, and in their 20s, 30s, and 40s and never touched a rod. And this last 2 years, they decided to go fishing. That part really excites me that, unfortunately, it's more fishing pressure, but at the same time, you're getting a whole new audience of people involved in something, and it's going to make the industry stronger. And at the end of the day, there'll be when there's more money in the industry, there's more money for the top end for the professionals in the industry and things like that. And there will eventually, I think, we'll be at a point where there will be a sanctioned professional sport behind it, not just private companies bickering all the time which one's better.
Right.
Um, I think it's getting to the point where we're finally gonna see that professional atmosphere where, like an NBA, an NFL, MLB, and then you're gonna start seeing all these private organizations being the AAA, where people can live, but they've got to work their butt off to be able to be the guy.
Right.
And I'm hoping that's going to happen sooner than later, and hopefully it's in our lifetime. But
We'll see where it goes the next
things are moving fast.
5 to 8 years.
It's moving fast.
It sure
Everything's
is.
moving really, really quickly. But it's been great having you on. I really appreciate you sitting down and talking with me. It's been an interview I've wanted for about a year now, and we've been crazy busy, and it's been great. But I'm glad we're finally kicking this back off again. I'm looking forward to.
Well, the shop looks great. It's to have a shop like this. These kind of shops went away for a while. And there's a few starting to come back, and it's really inspiring to the fishing community, as far as being able to go somewhere and actually pick the product up and look at it rather than look at it online or look at it in a magazine. And to me, I've always been one to look at something, feel it, touch it, whatever, before I bought it. And shops like this coming back has been a godsend for me.
It's been tough.
I don't have anything against Tackle Warehouse or Bass Pro Shops, but I would much rather go to my local and buy from them.
And I get that all the time. Like I've dealt with other shop owners and stuff and talked to them before, and they always have the pitchforks out for the big boys and the big boxes. And when I'm on the road, guess where I go? I go to Bass Pro, I go to Academy Sports, I go to Dick's, I go to all those spots. Guess why? I need tackle.
That's what's available.
I'm not going to say, oh, I'd rather shop there. I get it. I do like the people that really mean it, but I get a lot of people that are pandering to the small business, and that's almost more insulting than just going and buying the stuff. They walk in with a Bass Pro hat on, and then they say, oh, I like to shop local. I like to support local. And, I can agree with that. I see them in multiple times, whatever. And then they go, hey, man, you give me a hat? I'll advertise for you. I say, well, I'll give it to you half off. You spent a little bit of money today. I'll give it to you half off. Oh, wait, you're going to make me pay to advertise for you? What? You're wearing a Bass Pro hat that you paid $20 for.
Well, there's not a lot of knowledge to knowing what a shop of this caliber takes to put together, and knowing what it is behind it and keeping it going, keeping the stocks flowing on the shelves. And I commend y'all. You got a great shop, a lot of product. I highly recommend, if you're in the area, stop in and see them down here at 44 Tackle. They got it going on. If they ain't got it, I'm sure they can get it lickety split.
We try. Right now is the toughest time, but we're finally starting to even things out. I think a lot of the manufacturers
everything's behind right now.
Yeah, a lot of the manufacturers are starting to catch up a little bit from a year off, I'd like to say. And they've had more demand than they've ever had. So it's I commend them on putting it together with most of the things being made in China and overseas and stuff like that, and get their shutdowns plus our shutdowns, and none of them were timed the same. And so it's like, our customers are finally starting to be a lot more understanding when things are not on the shelf and trying new things. And that's been a real big part, is trying to find to stay alive when you can't get product is the hardest thing possible, because when that money sits in the account, it gets spent, but then you lose that product,
right?
Because you're buying other product, and then when that comes back into stock, you don't have the money to buy it. So it's a constant juggle in times like this of cash flow. And that's something that we were talking about earlier before we got on was, when somebody comes in and says, "Oh, you ain't got the new whatever by Strike King or Z-Man or whatever." What do you mean you don't have it yet? It was announced 3 months ago. And that's the one guy.
Think of it as rolling in the egg.
Exactly.
An egg's kind of oblong, and you're on top of the egg, and then it takes the tumble, and you got to be able to withstand that tumble to get back up on the egg again.
And to buy that to get that
there's
one
a
product,
long turnaround time.
Yep.
So if you're stocking 12 of this color in this size, you actually got to sell 24.
Yep.
To be able to put 12 back.
Yep.
And a lot of people don't realize that.
And the margins are very slim, and they're shrinking every day.
Yeah, I mean, if somebody thinks that y'all are charging $5.49 for a pack of Zoom worms and you're making $4.50, no, you're making about 48 cents a pack.
It's real tight right now. But all the prices have gone up as of July 1st. I was watching on my TikTok and stuff like that. There's somebody putting a video up that was changing prices at Bass Pro or Dick's or one of the big box retailers, and they were putting bags of Zoom speedworms up to $6.99, and people were like, "Well, that's outrageous," and whatever. And it's coming to a town near you. It just hasn't caught up. The inventory.
That's right.
The inventory is still sitting on the shelf at that cost. And if that company hasn't figured that out yet, that they've got to put that up for their incoming orders, they're going to lose a lot of money. So it's definitely coming, and it's unfortunate, but everything's raising in price. Just is what it is. But
nature of the beast.
Yeah. But thanks again for coming by, and it's been awesome to have you on. I'm sure we'll have you on again.
Thanks for having me.
We'd love to have you anytime. And it's been a good experience for me to know what you go through on a daily basis, and I can't imagine to carry the weight on your shoulders that you do every day that you get out of bed. And you're a true inspiration to everybody here.
Well, thank you. I try.
But thank you for watching, tuning in, however you do, whether it's on our podcast, on the People of Fishing podcast on iTunes or on YouTube. We'll be doing a lot more of these again, and we're back from our hiatus, I guess you could say, and we're going to be posting this on Facebook, YouTube, and on iTunes and Spotify. So we'll have multiple opportunities. As always, you can find me at Chris Kingry Fishing on all of my channels on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok. You can see Vernon Kemp on, where are you at on there? You got Facebook, Vernon Kemp.
Just on Facebook.
Just on Facebook, Vernon Kemp Fishing.
Old school.
He's old school. But absolutely, I've had a great time today. I can't wait to keep on going on with this. Guys, please subscribe, please follow, and we'll see you next time.